How are you doing? Welcome to Livestream number 190. My name is Lars Christensen, and today's topic is what to think about if you want to reuse a model in another design. This here is just 15-30 minutes trying to add a little bit more value to your Fusion 360 experience. So, if I do a decent job, then hopefully by the end of this, you feel like you're a little bit more enlightened with some of the things inside Fusion 360. This here is a follow-up on live stream number 183. That was Break Rule 1. You'll find that down in the comment area. So you can definitely check out that live stream. And of course, you also down there, you will find my email address if you want to send me another topic. Download the free CNC Handbook, whatever you want. But do me a favor, if this content is useful, thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. And as always, love your comments. I can already see we got people in here. So, let's cut to the chase here. So, I gotta be honest with you just for a second here. I really like to do these live streams for beginners. I think that's where everybody started at some point. I remember the frustration when I was trying to learn CAD, and that is primarily what drives me to do these live streams. So I think that sometimes we get hung up on trying to find the right way to do things. So many times on this channel, I will advocate that you just jump both feet in, start modeling. Don't worry too much about if you're doing all the right steps, as long as you get to the end result. Well, that I still believe that, but that brings up one of the things, and I'm going to show you just in a second inside of Fusion, this whole rule number 1 on the forum, where you create components versus bodies, and this live stream is kind of like when you got your pop model up, but to think about if you want to reuse it. So, enough of me talking. I hope I set this up. Again, thumbs down if this is stupid. Leave me a comment. Let me know. So we're inside of Fusion, and this is my lame attempt to model up something like a work table. I made this out of stainless just because I thought that was kind of fun to play around with the appearances. But this is really just kind of like a prop to get to the result. So we're gonna use a caster for this. We're gonna model up. Now somebody emailed me a few weeks ago and asked me if I could do a live stream on how to model up like a caster, like that sits underneath the table. You can roll it on it. And I said sure, but did you know that you can just download one from McMaster and then you don't have to model it up? This person was like, wish I'd thought of that. Great, and he was on his way. Now I'm going to model up a caster anyway. But that's just how I am, I guess. So we're going to talk a little bit about rule number 1. I'm going to show you that. So if you didn't see 183, you're not lost. And then I'm going to show you kind of where this whole thing, where you can maybe get hung up. So what I'm going to do to make life a little bit easier, I actually kind of created a sketch already, and I'm going to show you how to bring in a McMaster a little bit later. But I thought that I would just, instead of sketching everything up, and that takes time, I would have the sketch already kind of prepared, like a cooking show. This is 2 sketches. I'll show you this in here. There's sketch number 1. Kind of a side profile like that. Sketch number 2 is kind of the top of the caster. This is not really important, but just to save us a little bit of time. So let's start out with not obeying rule number 1 when you're modeling up something like a caster. That I would say in this exercise here, we're going to say that this part has three parts in it, the caster, that we want to mount to this table. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by hitting Q for press pull in here, and I'm going to select this inside here, that is going to be the wheel. I'm going to use over here in the extrude command, I'm going to use symmetrical, because I know that if I change the measurement to whole length, that I want this wheel to be 32 millimeters. Boom. Just assigned the wheel we're going to use here. It's not very fancy. You will get the idea. Now, to make life easier, we could start renaming these bodies. So we're going to do that. And if I'm going too fast, if you're new, don't forget, you can always rewind the videos, watch them again, rewind them again, watch them again, and if you get too confused, take a shot or something, and then you'll figure it out. So here's the wheel. Now you saw the sketch disappeared because this wheel consumed the sketch. So now the sketch is back here. That's actually a setting, but let's just skip that for right now. Now we're gonna do what I will call the cast the body here. So I'm gonna hit Q again, and I'm gonna select this side here, and I'm going to select the inside there. Now here's a little trick that you may not know if you haven't been around for as long as I have. Over here in the extrude command, you can actually offset where the sketch starts from. So if I offset this out 18.5 millimeters, did you know that now, even though our sketch is on the center, when you use this offset, it would actually not start extruding till it's out there. I'm going to do this one more time when we do the other one, so don't worry about it. I'm going to hit OK to that. So now I got kind of part of my caster there. I am going to go in and I'm going to do a mirror. And I'm going to make sure this is on bodies. So like this one, I'm going to mirror it over this plane so I get the second one there. So actually now we ended up with the body over here being the wheel, and body 4 and body 5. And then when I do the final extrusion up here, and I'm going to go minus 3.5, and I'm going to make that into a joint. Hit OK. Now that became kind of what I would call my caster body. I'm going to name it that. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to put in here is a pin in the center for this one to spin around. So I'm going to hit Q again and select the inside here. And if you drag out, I'm going to make that symmetrical over here too. If you're fairly new, so now you can see kind of like how we drag here. Now here I'm going to do something just to show you. If I select this face here, it's going to shorten down to that. So now we can see the pin is on each side there. But notice that when I have join on here and I hit OK, everything got consumed into one body because that pin connected everything together. So instead of doing that, we could go in and right click and hit edit feature and change this to a new body instead. And now we have the 3 bodies that kind of like model up with. I'm going to rename this one pin and just take a quick break here. So what do we got? I'm going to hide that sketch. So what do we got now? We got our caster that we just drew up. So these sketches was kind of like pre-created, but that was just to speed things up. Now we have a part file, a component here that has a body that is the wheel, that has a body that is the caster body, has a body that is the pin. And this is all good. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to save that. I'm going to save as, because I'm going to reuse the same model in a second. We're going to call this one Livestream Caster 1. Remember that? Save this one here. This is how I many times will model up. And this is when you're not following rule number 1. And that's just take that in. You're modeling things up as bodies. And what I'm trying to explain here is, as we're getting further down the road, is how this is going to affect things. So I'm going to stop right here with this body. We're going to leave that one. And then I'm going to show you what rule number 1 suggests. So I'm going to go back into our folder here, and I'm going to open up that file again. The same file with the sketch cast that we just used. And now I'm going to follow the principles of rule number 1. Again, I'm not trying to talk too much about rule number 1. You can do that watching 183. I want to show you what happens down the road in this case here. So I'm going to pretty much do the same thing as I did before, except here in the beginning, I'm going to right click and create the components before I even do any extrude anything for these parts. So one component, this one here is going to be the wheel. I'm going to create another component by right clicking on top here. I'm going to call this one cast the body. Whoops, sorry. I got too excited. Cast the body. And then I'm going to create the last one. That's going to be the pin. Slow left click. That's what I mean by slow left click pin. Okay. So what we had in the first one, notice we had one component. We had 3 bodies. Now, instead, we're going to get to the same result here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go into wheel and we're going to activate that component. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to hit Q. I'm going to select the inside of this one here. If you drag it out, kind of get the extrusion. I'm going to change it to symmetrical. You can do here, you can choose between like half of it or the whole thickness. I know the whole thickness is 32, that's why I changed that. And hit OK. So now I have one wheel, one component with that one body in here that has the wheel. Now I'm going to switch to the cast the body. And then I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. That cast the body is active. I'm going to hit Q. I'm going to select the 2 areas we want to extrude out. And then again, this little neat trick that if you never knew, that normally we're used to that an extrusion starts from where this sketch is. In this case, the sketch is right in the center line. You can actually offset that in the extrude command. So if you didn't know that, hopefully that was worth your few minutes with us here today. So I can offset that out, and the thickness of this one's going to be 3 millimeters. Hit OK. So now that one is sitting there. I am going to do what I did before. I'm going to mirror it. Make sure bodies are selected. And over the center line. And then do the exact same thing. I'm going to extrude this top one. Minus 3.5. Make sure it's a joint operation. There. Now we have this here. Last thing is the pin. Go down, make that active. Hit Q. Select. That's easy to select through the hole. That there. Drag that out. Again, change to symmetrical. So now it goes like this, and you can end it by selecting right on that face there, and it will end on that face right there. Okay, now if I go up here and click on this, then we have the exact same thing on the screen as we had on the first Livestream Caster 1. The difference is that in Livestream Caster 1, we have 3 created by 3 bodies. In number 2, we have those bodies individually in components. Now I'm going to save this too. So we're going to say save as, and I'm going to call this Livestream Caster 2. Okay. I hope this is good. I hope this is useful so far. You be the judge. Let me know. Now, with these 2 files saved, if we hit the little flyout tree, the 9 squares, you will see that we have Livestream caster number 1 here and caster number 2 here. So now I've created these as individual parts. I could, of course, also have created them inside of this table in here, inside this part file, but I wanted to show you how we could potentially insert these into this model. So let's start out with Livestream caster number 1, this file down here. That's the one with our bodies. So I am going to right click, say insert into current design, and that part comes in right here. Now you get a free move, but normally I gotta watch out. I think we're gonna be doing more of these type of videos because every time I create something like this, it always creates more questions. I would use this one if it was a very big assembly. And when I say big assemblies, for me, it's anything over a couple of hundred components. But for right now, we're just going to say okay to this. And you will see that that component now brought in here. And I would normally use a joint. Select the joint up here. And I am just going to hover over here and join this one to that one right there. It's going to jump into place, leave it a rigid. We've done other live streams on joint. Here we now have the caster mounted on our assembly as a component. Now you'll see that it's linked. That means that right now that caster in here is actually, think of this not really being in here. It is just kind of like a repetition of it in here. We can't modify this part in here because it is linked. We can modify it in the original file where we have our bodies. We could change things in here, and they could be brought, and they will then reflect in here because they are linked. Now you can break the link. You can right click and you can break it, but you can't get it back. You break it once, then you're set. Okay. Now let's try to bring in, let me just save that one, make sure we don't have the last one. I want to get the sketch out of there. Okay, there we go. Now let's insert the second, the second one we did. This is one we call rule number 1 because we have these components. So let's insert that one in here. So we're going to right click, say insert into current design. And then that comes in there. And identical to the one with the bodies, we get a move. I'm going to say no thank you to that. And I'm going to go ahead and let's make that to the other leg. There. To there. And did you notice what happened here? Let me just hit OK. The wheel and the pin didn't follow along where it did it with the bodies folder. And anybody who are feeling good about anybody feel good about this whole bodies components are saying yes, we know why. That is because I made it a component. Because just think about it like this, and this is the best way I can explain it. Bodies is kind of like if you model something out of clay, you get an option to kind of mix mash things together. Components is like separate parts that is now mounted together. So when we're looking at a caster, this is the second option is really the right thing, because a caster is not like clay that is just one big blob of something. It is made out of different parts, right? They're manufactured different ways. The wheel might be made out of rubber, so that is a rubber, and then the caster is a sheet metal parts that has maybe been bent or something together, and the pin is some kind of an extrusion. 3 different components. Where the first one we did is, I call this clay. Like this is, the bodies are kind of like different kinds of clay. They don't really mean anything. The reason I'm showing you both is because in our case, we'll bring in this in. The body is actually the easiest one so far, right? Like it all came together, and I guess this is one of my points. And I'm not trying to confuse anybody. And there is no right way, and I will fight anybody who says that. But I'm trying to show you that there's different ways to get to the result. But what I want to end up showing you is that the extra thought on when you want to reuse parts in other models, some of the things to think about. Now, what all we have to do in the part in here is we just gotta tell the software in the rule number 1 or the component part that these 3 parts are kind of fused together. We can do this in 2 different ways inside of Fusion. The shortcut way, what can be fine, especially if this was a part we had imported from somewhere else and it was 3 different components and we didn't really need to get any specific movement out of them, they didn't need to rotate, would be to use rigid group. Rigid group works in the matter that we click on rigid group and we just select the three components, the wheel, the caster body, and the pin, and we have them all three selected. We hit OK, and now they look like this. We have a little icon that they're rigid group, like puzzle pieces, what means that this thing right now is, we've kind of like welded it all together. Now I'm gonna hit save on that for right now, just to get it brought in, because doing this, if we go back to the table, you will see that we got a little update icon up here that shows us that our linked component, our caster 2, has been updated. So let's just click an update on that. And you will see that makes the wheel come together. So rigid group is kind of welding everything together very quickly. Again, this is very handy if you import it, if you got a model from somebody, an assembly from somebody, different components, and you just want to kind of like, you don't really care about movement and things, you just want it to all be glued together. Now, I'm going to undo this one, like this. So we just bring it back here, right, to this point here. Let's save it. Update that one. So now we're back to where we were before. The other option is to use joint, because this would actually be joined together in different ways. Now there is a cool function in here called as-built joint. I've talked about that before. What is super handy when everything is modeled together the way we want it. So in this case here, we could say that as-built joint, the caster body and the pin are probably a press fit. Select rigid, and we just added a joint right there. And then we could say as-built the joint between the wheel and the pin. Now that could also be rigid, but in this case here, if you want the movement, and I gotta be honest with you that if I was using these casters in an assembly, I would not have a movement. I would just rigid it, because it doesn't make any sense to have the movement in an assembly for this table. But just to show you, we can change this to revolute and just select an axis we want it to rotate around, and it's rotating around that right now. Now you can't really see it, but if we did this, if we right click, change appearance, and let's go to a wood, and pine normally has a lot of different things in it. Let's save this. Let's go into our table here. Let's update it, because the joint will do the same thing as rigid group. See how it's over there? And now you will see that if I grab this, that now the wheel will rotate. Now again, I would normally not have the wheel rotating in here, because it doesn't really make, there's no purpose. No purpose in this. Okay, so two different ways to work with two models. The one where we have the bodies versus the one where we have the components. And up to this point, we all can probably agree on that the component one have cost us a little bit more work, though that in the assembly here, we now have the option of making a rotation that we cannot get in here because bodies can't rotate. And that brings me to kind of like wrapping this a little bit up, because so far at this point I might vote for option number one. I definitely will not tell you that option number one here is a bad way. I know rule number one, to create the components, makes the most sense, but if you were just looking to get casters on a table, besides what I'm going to show you in a second, just importing them from McMaster, if you're just looking to get some casters on a table, this first option might be good enough. But what can happen down the road is that we decide we're going to create another type caster. So this caster here just rolls in one direction. But of course, some of you guys know that there's casters that can swirl around. So maybe we decide that we are going to create a whole other type of caster. But when we decide we're going to create another caster, well, that is many times when we decide that we want to reuse parts that we have already created. In this case, could be some of these components, like, for example, the wheel. So what happens is that if we decide suddenly that, well, I'm going to create another caster, and I actually want a section where this whole thing can swirl around. You have seen these, you're suddenly adding another dimension to that. Then suddenly we're saying, oh, well, I don't want to model everything up again. I want to use the wheel. And that is maybe when I decide that, well, you know what? I actually wish that I had created this as components, so I could just save the wheel out as its own component. Inside of Fusion, you can do that. I can just go up here and I can right click on the wheel and I can say create component from body. When I do that, it will create a component called wheel. I can do that for the other ones. Right click, create component. Right click, create component. So now when you're looking at this, you will see that this is pretty much the same here as it is over here. Except, of course, now we have kind of the same issue as we had before. This have now become, components, meaning they also need to be mated. What is fine. We have just seen how we can do that. So we can just say as built joint, and we can say we want to do this one and the pin again, and we can make that rigid. Right click, repeat as built joint, and select the wheel and the pin and make that a revolute. And that is kind of the same thing again. We got the rotation just like we did with these ones. These ones are identical on what you see on the screen here, what you see over here, but not what you see down here at the bottom in the history tree. And this is where rule number one can become important. And again, this is a very light design, but let me show you what happens with the two different ones. See, if I go ahead and say I want to save out this wheel body from caster number one, and go here and say save copy as. So this is caster number one wheel. Let's just remove Livestream, so that becomes such a long name. Then that body is going to be open there, and let's open that. Then we get the wheel. Now let's go into caster number two, do the same thing. Right click, save copy as. Let's get rid of Livestream on this one too. So this is caster 2. Hit save. So now here's caster number. This is caster number 1. This is caster number 2. Double click on that. Now, what is different between the two parts besides the pine? The biggest difference is down in the timeline down here. That in caster number 1 you have nothing. It's just a dumb body. There's nothing you can change here. There's no sketches, no extrusions. Where with rule number 1, the caster, you actually do get those comes with it. So you can actually go in and you can manipulate this wheel, change this wheel to different sizes if you want to. So this, I hope that this was not a waste of your time, and I hope that this was not. I want to show you also how to import the McMaster, because that might be important. But my point with this live stream, if you should take anything away with it, is, as I said in live stream number 183, don't worry too much. If you're new, don't worry too much about doing it the right way. I will rather have that you get something on the screen that you can use, and don't worry too much about the right way of doing things. But then what came out of that live stream was some questions from people who says, okay, Now I want to reuse part of my models, as in this case with these casters, I want to reuse the wheel. Then you do get an advantage of following rule number 1, that now this is saved out as sketches and extrusions, versus the other one where it's just a body. And the reason for that is when you're looking at the timeline in caster number 1, this timeline down here will literally follow every single step that we did. So it didn't register these parts as components until we actually created them. What means when we created those components, these sketches and extrusions was not part of it, where in caster number 2, we created those 3 components in the beginning, and then we made sure that we had each one active as we created each feature, and therefore they came in there. So I hope that this, and again, if this was confusing, I am sorry. Then maybe watch it one more time. Now, let me just wrap all this up with showing you, when this fine gentleman asked me about if I could show you how to model up a caster, the easy solution. So let me just save this table out. Save as, and we're going to call this Livestream table. Save that out. Now let's open up that original table all by itself like it was when we started with it. So what I told him was, well, instead of having to model up these casters, you could just go to Insert McMaster Component. It's going to open up here. Search Caster. Right there. And I'm just going to select a standard caster. There's all different types in here. You can go and explore which ones you want. All kinds of different ones. In all different sizes. So select the first one that is available. That one there. And I want the step file. And hit save. And now you will see that part gets brought in here. I'm going to hit OK to that. And then I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I'm going to hit the joint. And let's just go down and join this one to there. And we don't want a revolute, we just want a rigid. So there we have a little bit more fancy caster, but a lot easier than we want to model it up. I am just going to finish this by going in and do a rectangular pattern. Let's select components. Let's select this component here. Direction. Move it over here. We only need 2. And I checked this before the live stream. There's 436.5 over there. And then we drag the other direction and go to 2. And there is 908 down there. This was my solution to the fellow who wanted to know how to model one up. Just as fast to use the McMaster insert right there. I'd ask you a favor. Please let me know what you think of this. I hope this was somewhat useful. Kind of trying to follow up on some of these live streams, and I get your guys' feedback because I so truly appreciate it. That I hope that this just showed you what happens afterwards, down the line. That's some of the things that can get hard. And one of my reasons I had a video last week about sketching things up on a pen and paper before you actually model anything inside of Fusion. That could help you think about, maybe I want to use this model in another design later on, and then maybe rule number 1 does matter. I will keep fighting it. I don't think that, if you're fairly new to Fusion, just get in there, start modeling. Don't worry too much about the right way. It might mean then I can't speak. That down the road you gotta get into some troubles, but you know what? Most people have to. That's why you learn, and that happens. And I understand nobody want to go there, but That's it. We are 90 people on the YouTube. I think we all should also be on the Facebook. I'm gonna end it here. I hope this was useful. Be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. You let me know. Thumbs up if it's good. Thumbs down if it's bad. I want to make this valuable to you, so I absolutely appreciate your comments and what you have to say. So with that, hope you have an awesome day, and take care, everybody.